And I was with the 3rd Infantry Division. I deployed to Kuwait in January of 2003. We weren't officially told what we were going to do. We kind of assumed we were going to invade Iraq. Oh, wait, sorry. I wasn't allowed to use the term invade. It was actually a liberation. My bad. We were liberating the Iraqi populace. But we didn't have like a lot of information. They didn't really tell us what was going on. Thankfully, every day we had Fox News, fair and balanced, to keep us updated. But the most important thing on everyone's mind was General Order Number 1. Now, General Order Number 1 is an official Army rule that prohibits sex and alcohol consumption on a deployment. Now, leave it to the Army to take the fun out of everything. But this must be a more modern rule, because one time I was at a VA hospital in Oregon, and this older gentleman came up to me, and he was like, "You're a veteran? Well, shit, I wish I got to serve with you back in Nam, otherwise I wouldn't have needed all those hookers in Saigon." It was a compliment. I said thank you. But, I mean, think about it. Deployments are usually very long. Could you possibly abstain from sex and alcohol for that length of time? I mean, obviously General Petraeus couldn't. And you can read about that as well in my op-ed. So my fellow soldiers, they were like really grumbling about this. "Oh, I can't believe I can't have booze," you know. Or the ones that weren't married, or even some of the ones that were married were like, "Oh, I can't get laid, like this sucks." But for me, I didn't care. General Order didn't affect me at all. I was a virgin with a low alcohol tolerance. I was probably gonna miss praising Jesus on Sunday mornings in church more than my occasional Midori sour or Bartles and James wine cooler. But not my soldiers. But I didn't understand. I'm like, can't you just focus? Like, if we're like worried about like having sex and things like that, if we just focus on the tasks at hand and like, you know, surviving the war, doesn't that increase my chances of coming home in one piece, especially since my gun was strapped to my leg? Well, my commander actually didn't trust that our desire to live was strong enough to keep our hands off of each other. And he didn't even think General Order Number 1 was restrictive enough. He's like, "Oh, no, we need more rules. We need more rules." So we have our JAG officer, that's our unit attorney, and our colonel went up to him and was like, "I need for you to make an amendment to General Order Number 1. Make it more restrictive." And I was friends with this attorney, and he was bored to tears. I was bored to tears, because for 2 months we just sat in Kuwait with, like, we weren't training, we weren't prepping, we were just hanging out watching Fox News. So he was ecstatic to have a task, and he sat at his laptop computer and he's typing away, basically like he's drafting a new constitution for a liberated Iraqi democracy. And I was like, what the hell could he possibly be writing? And then he started chuckling to himself, and this made me really scared, because I knew him, and I knew that he was a total dirty perv, which is probably why we were, you know, friends to begin with. And I'm like, he couldn't possibly be injecting some of his naughty sense of humor into this document, could he? And I hovered over his shoulder, and I was like, waiting for him to be done, and he finished. I'm like, "You've got to let me read this before you show it to the colonel." And so I got a special sneak peek. General Order Number 1, Amendment 1, banned masturbation. And just in case the men didn't understand what that constituted, it went on to specify that men could not fondle their penises in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, awesome! Finally something in the Army that screws over men more than women. Oh no, I was wrong. It was an equal opportunity amendment, because it went on to say that women could not insert either their fingers or objects such as a tube of chapstick into their orifice. Well, thank goodness the Army was looking out for my safety. And you know, even though I was a virgin, I know about that whole size matters thing. I knew that then. And I was wondering, I'm like, should I tell him that, like, does he not realize that I know it takes a lot more than a tube of chapstick to feel any ounce of pleasure? But I kept it to myself, and then when we went home, his wife left him. Poor guy. I'm such a shitty friend. So I was like in hysterics and ecstatic to see him submit this to the colonel. Like, oh my God, was the colonel going to approve this document? And I just wanted to be a fly on the wall. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, whatever way you look at it, the colonel was like, you know, this is a little too graphic. Why don't you water it down a little bit? And he did, but it still went into effect. Masturbation was still banned. And I made sure to tell as many people as possible about the original wording of that memorandum. And then the colonel started a sexual inquisition, basically. And we had married couples in the unit, so we'd go around asking, like, do you think they're doing it? Do you think they're doing it? And I guess he thought that we were the type of soldiers that like to watch our comrades fornicate and then tattletale on them. I think he also forgot that our tents provided no privacy whatsoever. So to give you an idea of our living conditions in Kuwait, well, he had his own tent, but we lived in these big canvas tents with 65 of our favorite coworkers and only 3 inches separating each cot. And it was co-ed because he refused to lead a segregated unit. So he wanted a desegregated unit. And so some of the women, you know, they're like, this is horrible. How am I supposed to change my clothes? How am I supposed to do this? So they came up with these like really inventive masterpieces. They'd hang like ponchos and sheets and things like that from the ceiling. And then the colonel came in and he ripped them down. And he was like, how dare you women try to destroy unit cohesion? Yes, how dare I ruin unit morale by not letting these men watch me change my clothes? So I became the master of like a quick panty change inside of my sleeping bag. And then I also had to rely on this vital skill I learned in the 7th grade gym locker room where I didn't want the girls to see how much smaller I was than they were, where you feed your bra through your shirt. And then I'd like try to like just hide away, but at some point you stop caring. And some of these men that I served with were old enough to be my father. But my buddy, Ricardo, he wasn't gonna let General Order Number 1, Amendment 1, or 3 inches stop him from celebrating his daily ritual of self-love. I'm going to explain in just a minute with this